On the broadcast tonight, President Park Geun-hye will decide on whether to submit a proposal for a parliamentary confirmation hearing of her new prime minister nominee after returning from her week-long Central Asia tour. It's either half a win or half a loss, depending on how you look at it. Korea draws against Russia in its first World Cup match in Brazil, giving both teams a chance to move through, but it also puts them under pressure to win their next games. And despite the early start time, nearly tens of thousands of Koreans, all in red shirts, gathered at different sites across the nation to root for Team Korea. And the poor are getting poorer and the rich wealthier. Korea's pay gap is widening at one of the fastest rates in the world. We take a look at the problem and see what can be done. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다.
한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 6 a.m. in Cuyaba, and 6 p.m. on Wednesday, the 18th of June here in Seoul. Hello, this is Early Edition at 6, live from Seoul. I'm Moon Ganyo.
And I'm Daniel Chan. Thank you for joining us. President Park Geun-hye will re-evaluate embattled Prime Minister nominee Mr. Moon Chang-geuk's qualifications when she returns from a week-long trip through Central Asia.
At Wednesday's plenary hearing, lawmakers openly questioned the presidential office's competence in making appointments. Our National Assembly correspondent Kim Young-gil has this report.
President Park Geun-hye is mulling over whether to submit a motion to the National Assembly asking for a confirmation hearing on Prime Minister-designate Moon Chang-geuk.
The president is receiving updates on domestic affairs from top aides during her trip. The motions requesting the confirmation of nominated cabinet members will be reconsidered after she returns to Korea.
The presidential office had earlier said it would ask the parliament to prepare for a hearing this week. The postponement comes as both rival parties have been stepping up pressure on Moon to step down. He's been under fire for making controversial remarks years ago about Japan's colonization of Korea. At Wednesday's interpellation session, lawmakers grilled members of President Park's cabinet, where it became apparent that the prospects of Moon winning parliamentary confirmation are dim. Won Hae-young, lawmaker for the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy, lashed out at the presidential office for Moon's nomination.
There seems to be a problem with the presidential office. It's not making the right choices for prime minister. What's going on?
I regret the fact that such controversies continue to rise. I cannot comment on the presidential office's verification system for candidates.
President Park's first choice for Prime Minister An Dae-hee withdrew his nomination amid criticism that he had made too much money as a lawyer, benefiting from his status as a former Supreme Court justice. The National Assembly will resume the interpellation session on Thursday with a focus on the economy. While details on the agenda have not been released, it's believed lawmakers will focus on bolstering safety management systems in response to April's ferry disaster. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Well, if all goes according to plan, the United States will have a new ambassador to South Korea by the end of this year.
The U.S. Senate held a confirmation hearing on Tuesday for Mark Lippert, who indicated there wouldn't be much of a shift in policy under his watch. Our Hwang Sung-hee reports.
At a Senate confirmation hearing Tuesday, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea nominee Mark Lippert said the alliance between Washington and Seoul have never been stronger. He said if confirmed, he will work closely with South Korea to denuclearize North Korea, as it remains a grave threat to the United States and its allies. Lippert said he will continue to isolate the regime and increase pressure through sanctions.
continued to build the international consensus to isolate North Korea and its regime, and perhaps one of the best examples is to isolate them on the human rights issue.
Recognizing that the current diplomatic row between South Korea and Japan is a touchy subject, Lippert said he would not act as a mediator, but would encourage dialogue between the two neighbors.
We wouldn't play a mediation role. We obviously have conversations to encourage a better dialogue between the Japanese and South Koreans to work through some of these very difficult and painful historical issues.
Lippert said he will try to boost cooperation among Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington by arranging trilateral meetings, like the summit held in The Hague earlier this year. Lippert, who served as Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Security Affairs, is arguably one of President Barack Obama's closest aides. If confirmed by the U.S. Senate, he will replace current Ambassador Sang Kim in the second half of the year. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
And the Pope is coming to Korea. That has been made official and his schedule confirmed. Now, as expected, he will be meeting with President Park Geun-hye and presided over a Catholic youth festival.
Those two stops were widely expected. The Pope is also expected to deliver a homily in the central city of Daejeon and will invite the families of victims who died in the Seoul ferry disaster. This according to the Vatican and a local Catholic organization responsible for hosting the visit.
Right, Pope Francis will stay here in Korea for 5 days beginning August 14th, which will mark his first visit to Asia since being elected last year. Well, World Cup fever officially took Korea by storm earlier this Wednesday morning as tens of thousands of people in red shirts gathered on streets throughout the nation and many millions more at home, like myself, to watch Korea's first World Cup match against Russia.
Well, you were quite a big supporter and optimist of Team Korea. I wasn't, and now I'm feeling a little bit shameful about my choice of words. Well, Korea found the back of the net first to take the 1-0 lead, surprisingly, but unfortunately they could not hold on, let in an equalizer near the end. That's how it finished, 1-1. Our sports correspondent Song Ji-sun joins us live in the studio to fill us in on the details. So, Ji-sun, not good, not bad, but where do you stand on this?
Well, I think they really did pretty well compared to their previous matches, especially the friendlies they lost in the previous month. They did better than most people expected. After multiple failed attempts, the goal that came from Lee Geun-hye, who replaced Park Ju-young at the striker position in the second half. Just 12 minutes after stepping onto the pitch, Lee Geun-hye fired a strong, long-range shot that the Russian goalkeeper failed to punch out of the net. It was his first goal in his first World Cup, who's been most playing in the K-League. He missed out on the final roster for the 2010 World Cup in South Africa and has been playing for the Hangju Sangmu FC, which is a way a lot of athletes choose to serve the military.
Right. Some people weren't expecting much, like Daniel, who, just really just killed my fever.
I believe
there.
the numbers before
the excitement there.
Began.
Well, we don't play by the numbers. But anyways, after Korea got the goal, everyone was kind of disappointed that we didn't go on to win this match. And some people are saying that, we should have won this match to earn the 3 points that we absolutely need to advance to the next level.
Right, that would have kept us in the driving seat for the Group H to advance to the next round, but that didn't happen. And they kept the lead only for barely 6 minutes. And Russia's Alexander Kurchakov scored easily as Korean goalkeeper Chung Sung-yoon could not get back in position after blocking a shot by Alan Zakoev. And Korea's defenders were not prepared and aligned properly for the sudden attack, something they should really work on preparing for their next games.
Well, nonetheless, Ji-sun, I think I really did see an improvement from, a dramatic improvement from the friendlies that we saw. And, I think, luckily, fortunately, we saw the this kind of spirit, the passion, and really the vigor going on that we witnessed in the 2002 team advancing to the semifinals. So I think that was a pretty good thing that we saw.
I know, and exactly because the game was held in the morning hours, we thought there weren't going to be as many people out in the streets to cheer for the Korean team, but there were absolutely thousands of soccer fans on the streets of Seoul and other places in Korea.
That's right. One of the bloodshot-eyed, red-shirted cheerleaders out there for the Taeguk Warriors in Korea this morning was our Kwon So-wa, who has this report for us.
대한민국! 대한민국!
10,000 supporters converged on the streets of Gangnam in southern Seoul to watch Team Korea's first match in the 2014 World Cup against Russia. Yeongdong-daedo Street was one of 26 main cheering locations across the nation. Roads were blocked off the previous evening as people began to stream in the pitch dark. They did not have to wait in silence. Famous Korean singers took the stage in the hours leading up to the beginning of the game. The main event was Korean pop star Psy's performance of his hit songs Gangnam Style, Gentleman, and Champion. The cheers and excitement built up to a fever pitch when the whistle blew for the start of the game, and of course when Lee Geun-hye scored his goal in the second half.
The atmosphere in Korea is very, very great. We feel it's very, very friendly, and we really, really like it. So, Korea fighting! Korea fighting!
I think that Korea is going to win against Russia. I deserve so.
However, groans echoed throughout the crowd when Russia scored their equalizer. Disappointment over having let the 1-0 lead slip away, but also relief that the team didn't lose their first game and still has a great chance of qualifying for the knockout stage.
I anticipated we will win. I'm disappointed about the draw, but I think we will fare better in the next game.
Koreans have shown once again how they unite behind their nation's football warriors, even if it means getting up at the crack of dawn. Street cheering will start even earlier in the next game against Algeria, which kicks off next Monday, 4 a.m. Korea time. Kwon So-wa, Arirang News.
You know that is one cheering culture that you'll never find elsewhere around the globe.
That's right. Just in Korea, the Red Devils and this wave of red t-shirts in the streets.
Right. Well, going back to Brazil, you think the climate factor did play, did kind of help Team Korea because we're used to the humidity and heat in Korea. The Russians, of course, is synonymous with bitter cold.
Right. I think that was one of the reasons how Koreans could be really dominant in this game because they did not struggle with the humidity or the hot weather in Cuyaba. But on the contrary, the Russian teams did find it hard and tough to adapt to the weather there. Hong Myung-bo and the other coaches did a great job helping the players adjust and adapt to Brazil's climate, setting up the base camp in the Iguazu Falls and training in Miami in the U.S. before flying into Brazil. Now, the European players might have found it tough to run on the wet grass with high humidity and the temperatures near 30 degrees Celsius. But the temperature and the humidity won't be much of a factor in Korea's last group match in Sao Paulo versus Belgium because in that city, it's pretty chilly in the evening and breezy as well.
Well, you know, the weather hopefully will play in favor of the Korean team in the many more matches to come. But, you know, as for big cheers and lots of support, Korean footballers, they don't need to look all the way here to Korea because, you know, of course, Koreans living in and around Brazil, they aren't too shy about rooting for their home country, are they?
Right. And to give you some figures, there are at least 50,000 Koreans in Sao Paulo, in Brazil, and they have Korean town and everything there, and they're just as passionate about football just as they are about our own culture. And they flew, some drove all the way to cheer for them as well.
Right. Cheers of 대한민국 or Go Team Korea echoed through the air in the Latin American country as the Taeguk Warriors took on the Russians this morning. Our Son Jung-in reports.
Decked out in red, these Korean nationals gathered at a hotel in Foz do Iguaçu, Brazil, where the Korean national soccer team is staying. Some 100 Koreans living in and around the South American country did not hesitate to make the long trip to show their support. During Korea's first match against Russia, emotional shouts of joy, anger, and disappointment resonated throughout the hall. The game finished in a 1-1 draw, a result the fans seemed happy about.
They have done their best. I am very thankful for them for giving us joy. They really played well. Go Team Korea!
I almost cried when Hong Jong-ho was replaced due to injury, but I was overjoyed when we scored the first goal.
Even the Brazilian staff at the hotel was pulled into the passion of the Korean fans.
They played really well like pros. I think Korean team will stay in Brazil for a while.
It's a sentiment shared by Team Korea supporters in Brazil, and more people are expected for the team's second match against Algeria next week. 손정인, Arirang News.
You know, I really have no doubt that their cheers will continue to push Team Korea to go that extra mile.
Right, the 12 players in the pitch always contribute with some extra energy there. Speaking of which, Chisan, what about the next teams or the next group that the team faces for Team Korea in Brazil?
Well, it's looking pretty good for the Korean team because in the earlier morning, Belgium beat Algeria 2-1, and that puts Korea in a better place to advance to the next round. Belgium is leading their group after their win on Tuesday, while Korea and Russia share second place after their draw this morning. Now, after resting for 4 days, the teams play in their critical second match on Sunday local time. Belgium will play against Russia in Rio de Janeiro first, then Korea and Algeria face off in Porto Alegre. After the second game, it's usually clear whether a team will be making it to the next round, especially if they won or lost twice. But things do get a bit more complicated when teams tie, like we saw this morning. The Korean squad must beat Algeria this coming Sunday before going up against Belgium in the last match. Now, the most ideal scenario is that Belgium defeats Russia and Korea beats Algeria in the second matches, since Russia is competing with us for the second place and Algeria has already lost one match.
Right, so it seems like the teams in Group H are more or less pretty even. So, Ji-san, tell us, do you think we have a shot?
Actually, after watching today's game, I really think we do. Although we ranked the lowest in the FIFA rankings, numbers is not everything when it comes to the World Cups. When taking a look at the facts, there's an interesting thing because at all the teams in Group H, except for Algeria, they have made it to semifinals at least once before in previous World Cups. If you take a look at the stats, you can see that there isn't much of a gap between the 4 teams when it comes to their physique. But none of them can be overlooked. As you can see, they've all qualified first in their groups for this World Cup, whereas we finished second. Another thing to keep in mind is that the players must be wary of being too aggressive, as Captain Kujator, Son Heung-min, and midfielder Ki Sung-young all got yellow cards against Russia today. If they get another one in the next match, they will not be allowed to play in the upcoming matches.
Right, acting is quite important in terms of showing the extra response when you get pushed or bumped in Soccer World Cup. Well, Chisan, it's good to have someone who understands the sport and, of course, understand the culture of the host country to come here to provide us with some insights.
Right, and we all hope for many more victories to come for Team Korea. Thank you, Ji-san.
You bet.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life, talking with you on air and online, connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
Well, you know, there is no question that Korean electric vehicle battery makers have established themselves as major players in the market in recent years, and they are now thinking big and targeting China, the rising market for EVs.
And our Connie Kim tells us about the challenges, the obstacles Korean companies must tackle if they want to take the lead in the industry.
China plans to have 5 million electric vehicles on the road by 2020 as part of plans to address its chronic air pollution problem. It's a market Korea's EV battery makers are moving quickly to enter. Korea's #1 EV battery maker, LG Chem, inked a deal this week to supply to China's largest automaker, Shanghai Automotive Industry, and Chorus Automotive.
Shanghai automotive industry, unlike other local brands, caters to the high-end market. It has huge influence over the Chinese market. So we are expecting greater sales thanks to our recent contract.
From 2009 to 2011, during the infancy stages of the electric auto industry, Japan led the market, but Korea is making up ground. Last year, Korean companies took up more than 40% of the EV battery market share. And this is the year Korea is expected to leapfrog Japan. Other Korean players are also expanding their presence in China as well. Samsung SDI plans to invest $600 million over the next 5 years to build an electric car battery factory in China. And SK Innovation has entered into a joint venture with Beijing Desk Technology with the goal of becoming China's top EV battery manufacturer. Korean companies face the challenge of developing new, safe materials that can be used in next-generation products.
Secondary cell batteries, such as lithium-ion batteries, are regarded as dangerous because they contain liquid. Many companies from Europe and Japan are in the process of solidifying these batteries, but no Korean companies are trying it yet.
Extending the lives of batteries is another task for Korean companies who hope to cement themselves in China's green car market, which is expected to grow 20-fold by the year 2020. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
One of the leading economic narratives of our times is income disparity, something that economic policymakers here in Korea are certainly trying to grapple with.
Right, Korea's income inequality is in fact growing at one of the fastest rates in the world. For more on the effects of extreme wealth concentration and ways to level the playing field, we have our Hwang Ji-hye joining us live from the News Center. Ji-hye, let's start with a look at the level of pay gap here in Korea.
Well, Kanyang, to do that, let's first take a look at Korea's Gini coefficient, one of the main measures used to gauge the income gap. Now, based on households in Korea's urban areas, the index widened from 0.25 in 1990 to 0.28 last year. A reading of 0 means complete income equality, so a higher number near 1 indicates a widening gap in earnings between the haves and have-nots. And the pace of growth in the index is what we have to highlight here. A report from the Asian Development Bank shows that Korea's Gini coefficient grew at the 5th fastest rate among 28 Asian countries over a 20-year period beginning in 1990.
So, Gia, what is causing the gap?
Well, Daniel, it's the shrinking middle class, which has worsened since the Asian financial crisis in 1997. Again, if we take a look at the Gini index this time by year, the figure shoots up to 0.28 after the crisis in 1998, which is where it roughly stands today. Experts say massive layoffs during the crisis pushed many of the nation's middle class out of the group.
Before the crisis, most ordinary people thought they had a job for life, and companies were reluctant to fire people. But after the crisis, a large number of mass layoffs took place, which resulted in widening income gaps.
So, Ji-hye, I understand that the goal here is to narrow the income gap, but what can it do to the overall Korean economy, especially when it's suffering from sluggish domestic demand?
Well, one of the main economic priorities for the current administration is pulling Korea out from the low growth trap, and boosting domestic demand is considered the key for a country that's so dependent on exports, as widely known. And experts say that active private consumption comes from a large and healthy middle income group. They add wealth concentration toward the upper income group does not lead to more consumption, or in other words, strong domestic demand, and that it simply results in capital accumulation.
The recent dip in private consumption has made companies skittish about investing more. That results in more money just being piled up. This vicious cycle is a cause of the slowing growth trend for the Korean economy.
And companies are in fact sitting on their money.
Yes, Daniel, the current assets of listed manufacturers under the nation's 10 major conglomerates exceeded $245 billion as of the end of last year, according to the Financial Supervisory Service. That is a jump of close to 10% from a year before. A current asset is any asset that a company can convert into cash within 1 year. And Korean Finance Minister Hyun Oh-seok also recently urged the nation's businessmen to expand investments.
Then, Ji-hye, what about the government? What can the government do to address the nation's widening pay gap?
Well, that is a tough question that does not have a clear-cut answer, but experts do agree that the need for creating quality jobs and what is more important for closing the income gap, experts say, is reforming the employment structure, which includes measures like raising the minimum wage and bolstering the work share program. But they do add that those measures would require public consensus.
All right, Jay, looks like we know what to do. We just need a little follow-through from here on. Thank you for that report. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful time watching and cheering the World Cup. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Gan-young. To those of you in other parts of the world, have a great start to your day. And for those who cheered all throughout the night and into the early morning hours here in Korea, hope you get some good night's rest and see you right back here same time tomorrow. Bye-bye.